Good morning, everyone. We're very excited to be here. My name is Soni Meckem, and this is Geeta Wilson. Together, we work with about 80 other people at Humana in what we call the FastStart Lab. And what we want to do is talk to you a little bit about how we're taking a 50-year-old company that's highly regulated and implementing lean startup, Agile, some Lean Sigma, and design thinking in order to change the company culture and how we're going about doing that and what we've learned. So I know that this morning's speaker, Rich, when he was talking, he asked people how many people are trying to implement Agile across their organization, and I think there was only like one person who raised their hand and said they hadn't already done that. I'm going to ask a little different question. How many people in this room are using Lean Startup in their organization and trying to implement that across their organization? Okay, great, great. So I'm assuming everyone's in this room, and you can vote with 2 feet if you're not in here to find out about a little bit about Lean Startup and how we use Agile and Lean Startup together and how we do transformation. And before Geeta kicks it off here, wanted to ask you to think just for a couple minutes and maybe jot a couple notes. If you were taking a Fortune 100 insurance company, again, highly regulated, we don't build software, we don't launch physical, tangible products, right? We launch services. What are the things that you would do? Just think about the top 3 things you would do if you were trying to change the culture of that organization. Any ideas here? Just think about it for a second. Yeah?
Yeah, buy-in from the top.
Buy-in from the top, that's a good one. How would you do that?
A lot of conversation, a lot of education.
Okay.
Go the other direction, prove it out from the ground, do some scrappy prototyping.
Okay, so prove it out, prove it out. So this is something I used to work at Intuit, and I know we have some Cisco folks here. I worked at Cisco too. What we found is demonstrating is a great way. Just pick a small part to incubate an idea and demonstrate, and you'll once you can show success, right, you can get more people of faith. So Geeta, why don't you talk about how we got started and give a little bit of background about what we're doing. And maybe part of, before we start that discussion, maybe what we can do is, do you want me to play the video that talks about what our leaders are saying now that we've been doing it 6 months?
I'm going to wait to turn the volume down. Yeah? Okay. Well, while you do the video, let me do this. Let me set the context. Okay. You hearing me now then? Good deal. So that sounds better. I'm not reverberating around the room. So let me tell you the context of how we wanted to apply Lean Startup, Design Thinking, Agile, and a bit of Lean Six Sigma in there. And really sort of create transformation in our organization. We have over 60 million plus calls that we do a year across our lines of business. We get them from our different products. So if you're a Medicare customer, we'll get a whole call center that takes questions around Medicare. If you're in our Humana 1, which is an individual, so if you're a small business owner or if you're under 25, you might have to find yourself in a place where you want to take out individual insurance. And so we serve those customers. Then we also serve pharmacy-only customers or specialty benefit-only customers. They all have different call centers in our organization. We call that organization services. So all of these organizations with all of these members who may transition in between our products have questions that they come to us about. And the challenge is that it's very highly regulated, that Soni just spoke about. The challenge is that we want to try and improve the consumer experience. Is it easy to understand healthcare? Is it easy to understand healthcare insurance?
No.
When you get a claim denied, how do you feel? Want to cry. I mean, this is not sort of, buying roses and having one not, out of the 12 not come. This is a really life and death moment. Tender industry, and it's a very real problem. And so in our situation, what we wanted to do is elevate our service for more empathetic experiences. And we also wanted to have more of a universal experience amongst our different lines of business. So we would come to each other having a consistent level of service across our different lines of business. Problem, all of those service leaders had really done that independently, right? So this is my customer. This is what I'm willing to spend. This is the investment I want to make. This is the return that we will have. So having to bring together these leaders universally together and say, can we agree that we want to improve the experience? Yes. Larger question. Do we think there's so much difference between the individual lines of business that we have to have different services for each? That was a hypothesis that we wanted to test out. So we're going to now reverse engineer back into the hypothesis that we wanted to test out. Good? All right. So I'm going to show you a video that actually shows a bit of the outcomes that we're getting in being up and running around this new idea, this new way of working since February this year. Okay, so last October is when we started to really poke holes at, can we do this? Can we really try to craft a universal experience for our consumers across our lines of business quickly? All right, so I'm going to share with you an excerpt of some of the results that we're getting and how people are feeling with us having been implemented since February.
At the beginning, we also knew we wanted to engage our associates who are responsible day to day for delivering these services to our members, engage them in the process, right? They're the ones closest to that experience on a day-to-day basis.
But when I think about SEF and I think about the lab and the partnership with operations, it really delivers something that we've never had before, and I think it positions us to really be able to meet consumer demand in the years to come.
I learned you just put a scrappy prototype together, put on some jeans, go down to where people are doing the work, and have them use it, because I guarantee they're going to use it completely differently than how you think they would.
So here in the lab we have a method called Scrappy but not crappy, and what that entails is actually allowing us to get directional feedback from our customers without investing a lot of IT or people resources into doing that, and it allows us to move quickly.
So they're giving us a view of minimal viable products. So oftentimes when we're going to do something, we're going to do it big, and we're all in, and we, for years we were waterfall, we're more agile now, but just watching them do things, actually bringing in the member and actually talking to them and learning early whether or not something's going to work or not, I think it's just something fantastic. It's something that we're not used to seeing within IT.
What we found in our experiments is that there were words we were using that the customers didn't understand. A specific example was subsidy. So we had to change that word, and we worked with the customers and had some great conversation about what they'd like to see instead in the answer.
So we didn't sit in a room and we didn't imagine what the pain points might be. We went out and talked to customers, we brought them in, and we asked them what their pain points were. And we asked them to help us prioritize. And we learned a lot. We learned a lot about things we thought might be important to them, that we thought were cool and interesting, and we thought were important. And they kind of level set us and said, hey, that sounds like it's nice, but I have these other issues I really got to deal with. And so we went there based on their input and their feedback.
There's been a belief that Medicare members aren't really willing to interact in a self-service channel and prefer to speak to someone. And we really challenged that assumption and assumed that we don't know how our Medicare members would like to interact with us. And we've been pleasantly surprised by the results that we've found.
And then creating something that's, not so big that it takes 12 months to deliver on, and then maybe it is, maybe it isn't what the member wanted. So I think doing things in smaller chunks and actually getting the input of the member as we go along, that's what SEF is showing me.
We'll bring customers in and have them use the prototype on their own, and we can see exactly how they're searching and exactly how they're asking the question, and we can use that data to inform our future content creation.
We've really had a wonderful opportunity to work with associates and change how they're scheduled, change how they're measured, and provide them tools that enables them to be empowered to really provide that perfect experience for the member.
When I take a look at some of our key performance indicators over the past year, while the lab is not the sole contributor, it has certainly been a part of us being able to raise our net promoter scores, both transactional and relational. It's allowed for us to improve our overall member satisfaction over time. And so again, the bottom line is it works.
Some days I go home and I think, wow, I work in an innovation lab. Is what we're doing innovative enough? Is this enough? And in that week that I started wondering that question, we got 3 thank yous from associates.
You know, this is not about just flattering words or fluff. This is speaking from an operations perspective. We have literally changed the way that we're working and doing business. And at the core of all that we do is serving our members.
Okay, so any questions before I jump in? You just want to know more, hear more, a little bit more. So the other context that I didn't divulge as well is that we are seeing people tripling, or startups being tripling the number of investments that they're seeing from VCs on healthcare digital technology. And so the other part of this is that we have to be quick. So not only with the changes that we make, but as a company, we also want to move quicker in the way that we make decisions, in the way that we choose what to work on, in the way that we would determine whether outcomes are making sense or not. And this is in the context of having 50,000 people, a layer of, probably 1,000 of layer of middle managers, and steering committees probably in the hundreds, and task force that then are working teams in their thousands. How can you actually accelerate and move quickly in a culture that is so used to with having a corporate review process that really is risk averse and also needs everyone at the table to make a decision? So the other context of the problem was not only that we agreed that we want to make it universal and have a bit more consistency in a superior service, we also agreed that we need to do it quickly. And how can we move quickly? One of the concepts that we took is we sort of said, okay, well, maybe we don't know. Everybody could have sat down and said, let's just do the ideal experience and map out the current state to the future state. What we did is bring in like a various group of people in October 2014, and it was made up of VPs, it was made up of managers, it was made up of directors, it was made up of frontline associates. And we started to ask questions, and it was also around those 4 lines of business that we had at the time. And we started to ask them, we mixed them all up, didn't put Humana One customers here, a Medicare group here, and group commercial operations here. What we did is just mix them all up and thought, let's just try this hypothesis. If you bring people that are close to the work together with the management who actually makes the decisions, along with the operational folks who execute on the decisions and create the outcomes. So let's see if they come out with a universal type of experience, and let's see if it actually is the same or different across our lines of business. So, and we're the consumer experience organization. Now, with any consumer experience, continuous improvement, whether you're Agile, Lean Six Sigma, what you also have a challenge with is not trying to do this in just one corner of the organization. What you want to try and do is help culture change happen across the organization. And people see folks like yourself come in operations and want to walk the other way, thinking, what are you going to be doing to us, right? So there's also a context that, I've been in several deployments where, in our first Lean Six Sigma deployment, we were the ones who executed with the charge of trying to do make Lean Six Sigma master black belts, green belts, right, across the organization. And so there's already a perception that folks have when they understand and then see people like yourselves and how much receptive they are towards you. So, You also didn't want to just go and do a regular, we didn't want to just go and do a regular deployment, which meant, having a series of us folks go in the lines of business and say, okay, you've got 5 or 6 people assigned to you, you've got 6 master black belts, you've got 7 black belt projects, assign and create a project, right? We didn't want it to be at the project level, we wanted it to be at the transformation level, which meant being over here. And so our first route was getting these 50 or so people across the organization together and saying, okay, now define what are the consumer experiences, and we ran through a series of exercises. And I'm looking at Mike Kendall here, who now is part of Capital One. He was actually part of our Humana group, now affecting change in the same like-mindedness with Capital One. And what we started to see is, as we ran through those exercises, there was 2 things that came out. This has lasted for 4 days. Yes, we had buzz. Yes, we had a lot of excitement, and people went, wow. But what we had was 4 things that came out, and we suspended looking at data first. We suspended, some of the things that I'd grown up with, which is, let's look at the MPST data, let's look at the VOC data, let's look at the operational data and see what first crawl resolution or average response time is. We decided not to do any of that with those folks. Instead, we built a principle around deep customer empathy. Get deep customer empathy first, then go broad to go narrow, then rapidly experiment, and then we will go broad and scale, build and scale. So our first principle was going deep with customer empathy. So we sent them on the streets, we sent them around interviews. They had to make it all up. We gave them the context of the problem and said, now you figure out what the consumer experience journey is. And from that, we had 2 things come out. One was they all agreed on 80% of the pain points that we had were significantly big across their lines of business the same way. And then we brought in our complaint data, which are grievance and appeals data that go high up the food chain across to our CEO. And we brought in an expert in the 4th day, or third day, should I say, who gave us the G&A data, which was the highest complaints data. And we compared it to all the pain points that the team had said we were going to prioritize and work on. And they matched up. This work took 6 months. This work was 3 days, and a group of scrappy people coming together with the right expertise. That was the first data point that we showed to our executives. We went, and so one could argue, well, was it as refined, no, it wasn't, but it was very directionally correct. And then the second point is that the other hypothesis we tested was members wanted a consistent empathetic experience, and they weren't getting it in those different areas. So that said then, we learned 4 things from that. We learned if you put people who are close to the work on the work, you can get the work done. If you, if you suspend judgment and disbelief, and you suspend what you think you know for what you don't know and see the problem versus solve the problem. So we didn't ask people to solve the problem. We didn't say, we asked them to come up and frame the problem. And they came up with it and framed it. And then thirdly, we did lots of tests and experiments that week. And so we showed proof really quickly and really early, even scrappy. We tested things like, would someone want to, when they go into an out-of-network facility, ER is a good use case. You're not really thinking, the first thing on your mind isn't whether this network is in facility. When you're at ER, you're thinking, get this thing solved, right? And so an idea that somebody came up with to address that pain point was, how about we had it so on the cell phone, it would trigger, if you had geolocation service, it will trigger when you go there, whether it alerted you and us when you're in an out-of-network facility, right? Great idea, right, we thought. We put it in front of consumers, and they said, because we hadn't yet built that trust relationship, unanimously, as we brought the consumers in to test out this idea, they said, that sounds very Big Brother-like. We don't want you to be following us. In an old world scenario, some person would have loved that idea, brought it to a group, and said, let's test it and pilot it for 6 months, or we spent development time creating it. In that instance, we did not, right? In that instance, we took that feedback and we actually varied it, and they said, you know what, we don't want you to build that, but if you give us the option of letting you know when we're in that facility and alert you, we'd prefer that. So, it was really insightful, the consumer insight that we got on that problem. So that's one example of doing something which was in that 4 days that showed that we could change the consumer experience and we could make it better, but not necessarily rely on our own ideas, right? So seeing the problem was really important versus solving it. Then from that, and then what we did is bring a bunch of executives. We had and it was from our CEO to our, I would say, the next level of senior leaders, right? So about 30 people. We showed them excerpts of what we did in this 4 days. Now we had nothing to lose. What do we do after this? And we had nothing to lose in the way of, we've already gone through the training route before. You know, where you try and cascade training down, or you try and cascade, or you work on a couple of projects and you try and change that experience. We didn't want to do the project way, neither did we want to do the training way. What we really wanted is to infuse leadership with the inspiration to trust individuals who are actually doing the work. And that meant also coming together and suspending some key things, some key behaviors. So the principle that we kind of saw was, if we got more of their people and less of our people in effecting the change, what would that look like? And so when what we presented was with leadership, we said, look, if we did this in 4 days, can you imagine if I had a group of people like this same mix, different levels, different ranks in the organization, not unified by title, but unified by consumer problem, what we could do? And I said, we did this in 4 days. Think about what I could do in 4 months, or what I could do in 4 years for you, if we try to accelerate and working like that. And this is something I've never done in my career, in my history. Because you normally, as you go to executives, you normally have the conversation before the conversation before the conversation. So everyone knows the conversation you're going to have in that room, right? They knew a bit about me and the conversation I was going to have. But at the time, I said, so they had never seen, and what we did was we did side by side, the leaders, before I even presented the actual initiative, we had them do side by sides, which was join an associate taking the call. And so before I even laid out what we wanted to do, wanted them to feel and be empathetic to the experience. And so we did side by sides, and they saw the associate who's taking the call do gymnastics. They saw them sweat beads, right? Then we asked them to listen to the calls and say, what did you hear? Now they know the problems, man. They know those charts that say what the MPST scores are, or they know what average handle time is. And they were all looking at metrics like average handle time that perhaps incentivize or motivate the wrong type of behavior for that agent. Because they, as far as they want to do, is what do they want to do? They want to get off that call and wrap it up as quickly as possible. Far from empathetic as we'd want to be. So we had measures that were counteracting the actual behavior that we wanted to do. So instead of putting some facts and figures and some PowerPoint slides in front of them, we actually got them to do, to really immerse themselves in that experience and see those agents sweating beads. Then they heard those same agents who were in this experience, because we had about, out of those 50, we had about 30% of them were agents. Then they heard the agents say how they could easily see change in the experience with a process like this. So they heard them. I invited not us guys to present, but the vice presidents at the time of the operations and the agents who actually took those calls to actually present and tell them about the experience and what they saw. Then I left them. This is the deal breaker question that I asked. I said, do you want to change? Do we want to really improve? And if we do, we have to take down the corporate routines that we are so used to. If we want to change, we have to lessen the amount of meetings that we all have to get a decision changed or to make something work. We have to be willing to empower individuals and give them the autonomy to try and make that change and to try and even identify the problem themselves without you telling them what the problem is. And so they looked at me kind of blankly and like, what's your next question? So the next question was, in order for us to do this, here's what we need to do. We need to get people from your areas rallied behind this change that we want to see in the company about working scrappy but not crappy, right? And in order to do that, I need people from your areas. And they looked, what? And in order to do that, we also need a budget. And And you saw this sort of like, oh, what do you need? How much you need? I said, well, no, I don't need anything incremental. We're going to take the same people who are working in projects in your areas and bring them together. So I'm not talking about incremental headcount. And so they actually were in a whirlwind right now. They didn't quite know what hit them. And so in the next slate, we brought this concept of called the FastStart Lab. We didn't have a dedicated space. We didn't have dedicated individuals. We didn't have dedicated money at all. And it was October. Budgets have already happened. By February, we had secured enough seed money, right, which is startup, about $3 million, and about just under short of 100 resources across the lines of business, including a mix of all levels, to come together and try and address the service experience of the future, we called it. And simply the service experience of the future was design an experience so awesome that your consumers wouldn't want to go to another healthcare partner. So we went broad before we go now. The other shocker was, what do you think they had in their mind? After they bring this people, they bring this money, and they give us a scrappy work environment, which I would have probably just preferred a room that was a little larger than this and tables, but we had cubes. We had like this hybrid working environment, which was not sort of prime space, but we didn't go and ask for like a really nice stush looking lab, right? We said we'd work with what we have. But what was the first question you think they had for us? Given this money, given us these resources, given us this time, what do you think is on their mind as business leaders? What are we going to get out of it? Huh? When's the first status meeting? Yeah. What else?
Is this going to work?
Is this going to work? Yep. When will I get my return on investment?
How can I replicate this?
How can I replicate it, scale it? What are you going to work on? That was one of the first things they wanted to know. All the other questions, absolutely, right? Return of investment, when am I going to see? And so we're going to show you quickly how we framed an organization. Between now and August, we mobilized 4,000 people in the organization and introduced them to this method or this approach called FastStart. And we didn't intend to have FastStart go to 4,000 people. What we intended to do is just initially go to those 100 people and at least have them work on their own problems. So this is my next scenario, next challenge. I'll go to the next slide here and we'll go through this. So you've gone through, okay. So some of you saw this. Who are those people that we're bringing in? Right, so remember that 100 or so people, who are they? Well, I wasn't so concerned about their aptitude, their skill set. I think that if we brought people across legal, across IT, across finance, across operations, across the field, we kind of assumed that they would have the technical or the skill set needed to do their job, right? So I didn't factor in for recruiting individuals, only high performers was my task to them. But one thing that we did stipulate is that these individuals needed to be teachable. They needed to be humble. They needed to put self-interest last and themselves first and the interest of the company at large first. They needed to be owners who owned the outcomes, and I'll show you some of the behaviors. They needed to speak truth while they preserved the relationship. They needed to also cultivate genuine trust, because I knew putting us in a room together every day, day in and day out, if you introduced the wrong mix of people who couldn't work with ambiguity, it would really hurt. Because we could manage to the process, but we couldn't manage to the behaviors if they didn't have that desire to work from them themselves. And so they all had to come, and we brought them to an open house. And we kind of said, and we did 1 week of boot camp. So each of these individuals that were tasked to work in the lab were assigned by their manager, who kind of, we didn't rule this out, who kind of may have thought, well, who do I want to get rid of, right? Who is that poor performer that we can just throw in? And so the one thing that we turned around and said to them, hey, we'll catch your poor performer. So if you think that you'll throw a poor performer at us, guess what? In 6 months, 3 months, we'll return them right back to your organization. They'll show up. And so, and lo and behold, that's what we've done to some of those who have tried to bring those in. They came back and they returned back into the organization, not because we didn't want them there. Truth is, they didn't want themselves there. Working with ambiguity is hard. Facing change and facing questions that are from the business and saying, what are the outcomes that you're driving to? And being able to justify it in a way that you have to work with the unknown was just as hard. So this was not for just the average individual. It was really for hypo talent. You know, what was interesting was that we're in a culture, I don't know if your company is like this, but in our culture, you use jargon. You use insurance speak all over the place. And I'd been in the company at that time a year, and you know, we put a picture of a cassette on the screen when we introduced this to leaders. And they were like, what's that? And I said, that's sometimes the language you're talking in. And they went, what do you mean? And I said, we're in the digital download. And when you talk in a language, you may be talking cassette, but you can't hear it because it's layered in the jargon, but it doesn't take away the content that you're speaking to is yesteryear's. And so in order to move forward, he asked, like, speak plain English. Just say what you're trying to say and what the process is you're trying to move. And even though that sounds really simple, I don't know how we learned it. From children to going into school, to going into answering questions in degrees, and then going into the work world, we just started to inherit a different language. And the language was obfuscating, just like the word I just said. Right? The language was unclear, so that folks couldn't really know what they're deciding into. And so we decided to say, let's use plain language and reduce the jargon. We also said, this was another one in our company, where the leaders aren't the boss, but the voice of the customer is the boss. We had a challenge just in here before around how do you get someone to persuade them to do right or wrong, or what they think is right or wrong. Holly, you saw in the video, we have Medicare members, and the hypothesis of Medicare members is that they will not, they basically want to talk to someone rather than use a self-service type of technology. So when they call in, the hypothesis is that they'll call in wanting to speak to someone. Well, we have people in the room today, in here, who are Medicare eligible. And they're like, we know they just want to talk to people, but there's a technology that we wanted to test out and introduce and say, I think we have to test that hypothesis, where the Medicare members, those who are senior, will really want to. And so instead of proving out the P&L leader, we actually ran an experiment, and we found that 30% of Medicare members would actually opt into a touchscreen technology when calling in, which means that they would go in and self-serve. That was the first time that somebody had come to them with a different viewpoint and vantage point. So that's an example where you can see that instead of trying to sit down and argue with someone, what we did is just say, okay, can a team go and test that assumption out? We also have different routines that we foster in the lab. One of the routines is called a jolt. The jolt starts with a jam, a report out. So we invite cross-functional collaboration. Then it starts out with another LED moment, which is sort of like a stimulus and a way to start your day and kickstart it, and then with a life moment. We do this religiously every day, and we've been doing it for 9 months. That would probably be a secret sauce that we say binds us and joins us together. It also circumvents the meeting times that we have. So teams know what we're working on, and they know that, okay, that's a roadblock that you ran into. Let's share with you how we overcame that same roadblock. So it's a way for cross-functional collaboration to happen without actually enforcing it in teams.
And I'll just jump in here a second. Think of our Agile stand-ups, only instead of each Scrum team doing them together, we have multiple Scrum teams that do that because ideas get cross-pollinated and generated on a daily basis because the lab is made up of cross-functional teams across the organization. So I might have an idea and it has to do with provider networks, the doctors and nurses and testing facilities and hospitals that our members go to. And in the Scrum team over there, is somebody who works in a provider network and they go, hey, if you've got a blocker on that, I can fix it. So it's a little twist on the stand-ups, and we do them every day. But in addition to that, it's a way that we maintain our culture, because one of the things that we do is the life moments at the end, where we share quickly important moments that have happened in our lives. Like, I had a birthday and my son hit his first home run. So there's 80 people in the lab that are off doing their own thing all day long, but we preserve and protect that half hour every morning, where we not only do the readouts, but we share life moments. We play a little music to get us all together and get us going. And then the LED moment is really something inspirational that we can take with us through the day to help maintain the culture that we want to have in the lab of helping people. And in Humana, we're all about wanting to be healthcare partners, not insurance companies, right? Where we're really focused on that deep customer empathy. So the Joel for us Agile folks is really our way of doing the daily stand-up.
Yeah, and very quickly, like we have a guy called Nick, who was a call center agent, and now how would you describe what he's doing now?
He's our like our master scrum master.
If within 8 months, this guy shows so much potential and changes to the actual frontline that we made him Scrum of Scrums. And I just got feedback last week from the business experience owners saying how he's so effective in articulating and crafting what some of those stories are, which they weren't able to do. This is someone who would never in their wildest dreams would have thought they would be working this way in a less than formalized environment. He also, and this is such a touching story, one time we had the Jolt, he also, he said, could you make sure that at 9:36 that we have a moment of silence? We're like, okay. Not sure what was going to happen at this particular point in time. And so, true enough, at 9:36, he stands up and pulls a piece of paper out. And he starts to shake. And he starts to read a tribute to a fellow vet who he lost in service. And he starts to talk about, it was that day that he lost that vet. And it was also that day for the last 5 years, for that week, he wasn't able to come to work. And it was the first time that he was able to step in to work after 5 years. And so you say, what happened, right? That an individual was, to all extents and purposes, healed of their PTSD and able to function, not just for that day, but for that week, and come in and then tell us all their story. And something happens in the culture. We affect change and we affect the outcomes, but we don't really minimize that accountability to the behaviors and practice that we want to instill, especially as we serve our members. So one of the things that we have is we have what we know is right for the consumer on the left-hand side. And the things that to do what's right for the consumer, we want to be able to have empathy. We want to use validation. We want to work faster. We want to also do fruiting and frogging. Now remember, for like 2 months, 8 weeks, I had all of the leaders in suspense around what the initiatives were that we were working on. Because we said, if you put these folks out and you ask them to do deep customer empathy and they listen to calls and they observe the experience, they'll come out with the right things. Why do we need to tell them? And so that's exactly what we did, but it was excruciating because it was so anti how we'd worked in the past, right? And then they said, well, how do we know you're not duplicating the work that we're already doing? How do we know you're not also, trying to address something that we tackled before, right? And we said, well, in low fidelity state, we don't really land on something, and that question will self-destruct because it won't pass the higher fidelity test, so it won't make it. But this was all new to this group, right? And then we had even had one leader who said, and I made sure that every week that we published a weekly report that had everything that we were working on, all the insights that we were learning, all of the stories that we were working on, all of the pain points that we were addressing, all of the multiple initiatives. And I knew that this was way too much information. So there was one principle: kill them and overkill them with so much data that they don't know what to do with it. And so it did create another question for them, which was, or another comment, well, we don't know, stop teaching us about, this low-fi, is it mid-fi, is it high-fi? We just want to know if it gets, I said, oh, that's a great question. Because they said, we want to know when will you actually start changing the experience? I said, well, what we'll do is when we get the higher fidelity and we go to mid-fi, bam, we will come to you with those sets of initiatives that we'll work on and that we have enough data that suggests that you should pursue it. And we came up with fruiting and frogging. Fruiting was low-hanging fruit initiatives. Frogging was taking us to taking us above and beyond where we are. So we had a blend of initiatives like that. On the right-hand side, what does the business want to know? They want to know on their performance side, is this hurting my productivity and cost? They want to keep the business operations running. So even though I had these individuals who are in this lab working in this way, it did not take away from our ability and our accountability to make sure that when we went up the fidelity state, that we could say exactly what the impact was and where the impact might be made. So we had folks who were working on what the MPST impact might be, what were the operational drivers. So we talked in their language as we got up the higher fidelity chain. And then we also made sure that we said, could you create a sandbox for us? And they went, what's that? And said, well, give us the license to work on things that have been worked on before. And that was really new because people in the organization wanted to jump on what they thought was right. And in our way, we needed to suspend disbelief and suspend judgment. I'll give you an outcome. I think this is just one more slide that we have on my part, Soni. I'll give you the outcome. So this is, if you tell me what the secret sauce is of the lab, it's making sure that you are so apt in all of your areas around, if you do Agile, do it well. We also applied Agile to a non-technology environment, meaning we were applying it to the way that we do service. And the way that you do service, think about that for one moment. Our people practices team, we have a team called People Practices, who are all they're doing is trying to empower the associate to enable a good experience. What's involved in empowering an associate? It's the way that they're managed, right? Those operational metrics I spoke to earlier, we have to remove them. It's the way they're equipped. What tools and technologies do they have to do the work? And then it's the way that they're authorized. What discretionary authority do we give? And we ran into things like, well, surely we could do what like Zappos does or like what Marriott does or Ritz-Carlton does and give them like a set amount of money that allows them to for example, a plan that was turned, right? That, for example, they missed their monthly payment and the plan gets turned and they have to start all over again. What about if we gave associates the discretionary authority to actually then say, you know what, don't worry about this month. We've got you covered and we've reinstalled your policy again. Well, we found out through corporate reviews that there was no way that CMS, our regulatory body, would allow a member to get more than $50 of what they call gratuitous license by a company. Otherwise, it would be you'd be sort of showing favoritism or you'd be showing something that's not objective. So that was something that couldn't work, even though you might want it to work, right, and give that authority. So to try and have for those associates an empowered ability and then work in a Scrum or Agile environment, it was the hardest thing. The technology people, we had self-service teams, the technology people, it was easy because they had a product they wanted to release. Like we just released last week, in 6 months, something that would have taken 18 months in our organization to do. We overhauled all of our web content around our search engine and we changed it. And so we changed it, we implemented a new technology, completely like going uphill. And that was so it was not so easy. It was hard, but it was easier than an organization that has having to change behaviors and practices and use this Agile approach. Because they're like, what stories in a non-development wrap, how do they do that? And the way that we said to do that, and they finally clicked, was we said, in a normal environment, you'd use traditional project management. And traditional project management tells you to outline everything, your plan, and go very linear. In a non-traditional environment, how you would do it is you'd use Agile. And they were like, why? I said, because you just got to think of the 2-week sprints and plan for those 2 weeks.
Right.
And it changed them. I mean, Soni can really talk about that change that happened, but it allowed them to think, when we said non-traditional, non-project environment, and we think about all the work, put it all out. And then they started to like figure it out. But I'll let Soni speak to how they actually moved to the place where they could actually apply it.
Right, and on this journey, and what I will say is that we were experimenting on ourselves. Lean startup is about getting to the market and getting revenue in as quickly as you can. And that's what we wanted to do, is get the experience out there as quickly as we could. So one of the challenges that we had in the beginning of this was how do we know we're being productive and we're moving as quick as we can? When we were going through experimentation, we could count the number of experiments we were going through, but it quickly became apparent that as we moved closer to building something and integrating and releasing something, that our productivity appeared to be slowing down, even though it wasn't. And we weren't really managing the work. So the way we think about it is that we have a strong portfolio management, which is based on both what's important to the business and what's important to the consumer. How we do the work is using Lean Startup and what other methodologies you use to build, because we do both software, hardware, as well as more intangible things like processes, policies, people changes. But how we manage the work and how we organize around the work is using Agile and Scrum. And had we not done that, first of all, the 6 months it took us to get to market with this new tool, which was by open enrollment, which is supposed to save us how much, Rich? Is Rich in the room? For advanced search?
The first year was $3 million.
Yeah, it's $3 million just for that one project. We started with 150 ideas, we narrowed it to 50, and then using, as we got to higher fidelity, some of the more traditional business measures, as well as NPST, we were able to narrow that to a smaller portfolio. There's very few startups who began in February that could say in their first year they're going to generate $14 million in savings and improved experiences to the consumer. That 6 months to get to market would have been 3 if we had not run into barriers in the organization and how decisions are made and how uncomfortable that they were, even though they would go to market with no data and spend millions of dollars building things because we were doing it differently. We're under a lot of scrutiny. But if we had used just Lean Startup and not put Agile on top of that, it would have been much longer. So what we've discovered in this first 6 to 9 months is that it's not just design thinking and working with the consumers. It's not just Lean Startup. It's not just Lean Sigma and figuring out how to improve processes. But Agile and Scrum, particularly for our teams, are key to success. So it's a combination of all of those things. And starting and demonstrating in a lab environment, but making that lab not just members of consumer experience, but bringing IT in, bringing members of the business in, like Rich was talking about this morning, in order to get momentum with the organization. And we've gotten a lot of support up to, I think Geeta mentioned, being invited to train the top 4,000 leaders in the organization. And we did all of that at the same time that we've been generating 150 ideas, narrowing that down to a very clear-cut portfolio that we're building right now that's going to generate $14 million for the business. So we're very excited.
So we're over, but 7 minutes over. Up to you if you want us to take questions, or whether we leave it as is, or we can do one one-to-one questions after the session. But hopefully this gave you a little bit more insight. We started late, and I know folks had to get out. So we started late, but if you want to have a one-on-one after the session, we'll be available for the next 5 to 10 minutes. Sound good? Thanks, guys.